After he arrived in the US capital on Thursday, Chinese Vice Premier Liu He has gotten straight down to business, talking trade with US officials. Beijing has dropped an anti-dumping investigation into imports of sorghum from the country, and its officials are touting the benefits of free trade.
China is actively working on upgrading its industrial structure. The consumers want a higher standard of living. China is willing to expand imports from countries all over the world, including the United States, and welcomes companies, including US firms, to do business in China.
The conciliatory measure stands in contrast to the rising trade tensions between the two countries. Analysts believe it will help narrow the $375 billion US trade deficit with China by $50 billion this year. Reuters reported Beijing also offered to buy American goods worth an additional $200 billion. Chinese officials have denied this claim, but say they are opening up some sectors like agriculture and finance to foreign companies.
Lower tariffs and lower non-tariff barriers, and here's the point, American ownership of its own companies in China must be permitted. In other words, right now the limit is 49%. And that's one of the causes of the theft and transfer of valuable technology.
Yet, US President Donald Trump doesn't expect a breakthrough.
The reason I doubt it is because China's become very spoiled. The European Union has become very spoiled. Other countries have become very spoiled because they always got 100% of whatever they wanted from the United States.
And even if both sides agree to a roadmap for more balanced trade, analysts don't expect the US trade deficit to shrink significantly anytime soon. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Patrick Falk has this update from Hong Kong.
The talks between Trump and Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, by all accounts, have gone smoothly. And we are hearing from Chinese media that the Chinese delegation that is attending these talks is sincere. We've got these concessions being made on sorghum, which have been hurting both Chinese and US farmers, as well as the latest developments with ZTE. So I think there is good reason to think that further measures can be made in the coming days with regarding to reducing that deficit.
Let's go to New York next, and joining us from there is Anne Lee. She's the CEO of new technology investment consortium Coterie and the author of the book, Will China's Economy Collapse? And great to have you on the show. Look, interesting times, of course, for the US and China. Beijing has denied these media reports that it is prepared to help reduce the trade surplus, its trade surplus with the US by $200 billion. But it is offering other concessions, including sorghum. What message is Beijing trying to send the US?
It's basically saying it wants to play ball because Beijing realizes that they have less bargaining power after what happened with ZTE. And even though ZTE actually, if it went bankrupt, would probably hurt US and its allies more than China, given that it is a worldwide company importing lots of chips and supplies from US allies like Japan and South Korea, also American companies like Qualcomm. I mean, basically, Qualcomm exported a lot of chips to ZTE. And so if that company were to go bankrupt, it would certainly hurt the US just as much. And so China really had thought that the US wouldn't do this because it would boomerang. But given that the US has taken on such a tough stance, China realizes that they will have to be dealing with a much tougher negotiator, folks who are willing to take a hit, and so therefore they're coming to the table with, I think, more concessions.
And so from your analysis, the way you see it is that Trump's very hard line on this seems to be working in his favor then.
Yes, I guess it's true that this is probably going to help him in some respects. Trump, as you know, was a billionaire in real estate, and therefore he's had lots of experience in tough negotiations, especially with other real estate developers and New York bankers and New York media people. So he's had to deal with a lot of tough characters in his career, and therefore he is probably drawing upon that experience in trying to deal with the Chinese.
Do you think this is something of a turning point for China, looking further down the road? Because, I mean, if you follow the narrative of the Trump administration, Trump there saying they've had it far too good for far too long. Is this going to force China to change tack in terms of how it treats its trading partners?
Well, China certainly is probably going to be more conciliatory with the U.S. As long as this Trump administration's in power. But China certainly isn't going to let go of its larger vision of a made in China 2025. It realizes that if it doesn't sort of play ball here, China's goal for that is going to fall apart because they still require key technologies from the U.S. and other parts of the world. And if the U.S. is going to force blockades and sanctions in these areas, China is not going to be able to realize its own goals. And so China realizes that they, need to be more realistic about what kind of negotiating power they might have. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But in terms of reducing it by 200 billion, the trade deficit, that would be extremely difficult to do unless the U.S. opens its ability for China to buy high tech.
Right. Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. China expert Anne Lee, thank you ever so much.